Welcome to the Codemasters Full Year 2020 Results webinar. I now hand over to Frank Sagna, CEO, and Rashid Varachia, CFO. Frank, over to you.
Thank you, Tamzin. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Codemasters Results. We're going to go through a little bit of background on Codemasters for those of you who are not that familiar with the company. We'll then go to the highlights of the year, go through the financials, talk to you about the outlook and have a quick summary. And after that, you'll be able to ask as many questions as you want. So regarding Codemasters, we've been around for 3.5 decades making games. So we're not a new kid on the block. We've been specializing in racing games for the last few years, and we've got about 750 employees, mostly across the UK, in Southern Birmingham and Cheshire, with a small office in London, but also in Malaysia, plus a number of people who are working from home, scattered everywhere in the world. Just to remind you, we IPO'd the company just 2 years ago, and we recently made an acquisition of a studio called Slightly Mad Studios back in November. The management team holds just under 4% of the company. In terms of the company strategy, as I said, we have been focusing on racing, and our strategy has not changed. So we want to continue and strengthen our leadership in racing. And for that, we want to both grow the audience, but also increase the average revenue per user. I'm going to hand up to Rashid, who will talk to you about COVID-19 before going back to the highlights.
Thank you, Frank. So in terms of COVID-19, just wanted to briefly outline how the business has transitioned over the last 3 months or so. We were very quick to respond and to ensure that all of our teams were working from home very effectively and with minimum disruption. I'm pleased to say we lost almost zero productivity as a consequence of our teams being mobilized to work from home. There was some additional spend in terms of CapEx, which is a phasing issue for us as a business, because we would have spent that during the fiscal year anyway. There was also some learnings from our SMS colleagues as they've been working from home now for a number of years. Now, I'd just quickly like to highlight the chart. This is our combined average daily active users and the number of people who are playing our games. And you could see up to the impact of COVID-19, it was averaging at circa 400,000. And like many other video games businesses, we have seen a considerable spike in terms of our daily active users across all of our games, and in particular on Formula One. Frank, back to you.
Thank you, Rashid. So moving on to the highlight of the year, we've had a very exciting year. Operationally, we're excited to have been able to deliver our objectives. We've released 2 games, and we have a ever-growing back catalogue. I want to remind you that we had 3 games last year, so being able to grow with only 2 games was a really good achievement. And more importantly, we've been able to put the foundations in place for further growth going forward and more stability and predictability. We extended our F1 contract until 2025 with an option to 2027. I can go into more details later. I'm sure you'll have questions on that. But basically, the extension is based on a certain level of revenue that we achieve, and we're very close already. So we believe we'll have the license to at least until 2027. We've had the fundraise of £20 million for the acquisition of Slightly Mad Studio. We'll talk about Slightly Mad in a minute. We've increased our strategic focus on game as a service. And when I mention about growing the average revenue per user, this is the leverage we have to do so. We continue to grow into the world of esports. I'm sure a lot of you have been able to see the impact of esports during lockdown, particularly with Formula One and Rally 2. It has been a fantastic opportunity that was totally unexpected, but one that we want to continue and keep momentum on. We have sold the Reliance stake of 28.5%, which they had at IPO left. We sold half of it in June and the other half in November, so no more overhang from Reliance. Following Reliance's departure and board member We have replaced Reliance by Lisa Thomas, who's from Virgin, and Ian Bell, who's the CEO of Slightly Mad Studio, also joined the board. And last but not least, very recently, post-results, we've announced the signature of a new license with WRC, World Rally Championship, which will start in 2023. So very quickly, looking back on last year's product, as I said earlier, we had 2 launches and an increasing back catalogue. I think you're aware of both Formula 119 by now and Grid. We're happy F1 performed extremely well. The business of Formula One has grown more than double since 2015, so in 5 years. And I could say, without giving the exact quantum, that 19 was the biggest growth of the past 5 years. So very excited about the current momentum. And we are obviously benefiting or fortunate that in the last few months, people have been at home playing even more. But I think it's really quality of the game that make a big difference. Let me remind you that it was the highest rated game on PS4, and that the game was the first one which had 2 years of development cycle and a release in June instead of August. So a big success, probably bigger than what we anticipated. Grid was rebooted successfully. We did particularly well on Stadia. We're in top 5 titles. I would say Grid did well, but probably not as well as we're expecting. But we've had some good feedback, a good understanding of what we could have done better. And from the data we have and consumer feedback, we know exactly how to fix it for going forward and grow the franchise again. But it's certainly a good reboot, and we're very happy with the results, and which will lead to an even bigger game in the next couple of years. And back catalogue, I mentioned earlier, it's now a significant part of our revenue, close to 25%. Dirt Rally 2 and F1 18 were a big part of this, and Games as a Service, which is starting to contribute more and more, as we'll see in a minute. In terms of F1, more specifically and the contract, it's the longest extension we've ever had. We've discussed this for a while already, so you're pretty much aware of it. But what's interesting is we have managed to secure a deal where, instead of having a big jump in terms of our minimum guarantee after the end of the previous contract, we've agreed with Formula One to have it in stages, and the minimum guarantee is only growing 12% a year. I could tell you that our growth in terms of profit every year is certainly has been superior to the 12%. So we feel that we've got a very strong deal that allows us to continue to grow the franchise and remain as profitable as we were in the past. And our relationship with Formula One is going from strength to strength. Clearly, the lockdown has made gaming a huge part of their marketing, and we've benefited greatly from it. But they've also been much more helpful in terms of offering us free advertising, presence on their digital channels, and that has made a big difference. So our relationship getting stronger. We've got secured deal until 25 minimum and potentially 27. And we feel that we've achieved something that is very important for us, not just to reassure the market, but even more in terms of our relationship. We can now invest for the long term and not be worried about, should we invest on a 3-4 year period when we're not sure if we're going to have the franchise. That's no longer the case. And I think that will unleash a lot more potential. And while we doubled the franchise in the last 5 years, we're convinced we can still double it in the next 5 years. Slightly Mad Studio, a competitor until now, probably our toughest competitor. We regarded Slightly Mad as the best studio on the market next to us. We raised 20 million. Rashid will go into more details if you wish later on the details of the acquisition. But strategically, that was important to us. It adds more game to our portfolio, more diverse revenue stream, less depending on any one particular franchise now that we've got quite a few more. We've added IP that were partly either owned, like Project Cars, or licensed, like Fast and Furious. And we believe that is a very strong addition to broaden our leadership, strengthen the barrier to entries, and further support our future strategy of becoming the racing channel for gaming. They've got 150 people scattered across the world, although half of these people are based in the UK. I believe the last count, they were based across 18 countries, including Russia, Turkey, Singapore. They're really everywhere. And as Rashid was alluding to earlier, their remote way of working has been extremely helpful during this lockdown because they've been able to guide us and make it even easier for us to make that transition. And we're expecting the SMS to bring about 30% this year in terms of adjusted earning per share. So a significant accretive deal for us. We are growing on mobile, and we are growing on several fronts through various partnerships. F1 Mobile, our own game, but developed through a French studio in Lyon. The game continues to grow year on year. It is still not a huge number. I believe our total mobile business is around 5% of our total business, so not huge. And there's more than one game, but F1 is the biggest part of that for sure. It is growing, it is profitable, and we've even had the opportunity to use the game for esports. So again, not big, but very profitable, and we hope to grow that business. This is an area we want to put more emphasis going forward. SMS, we launched a new mobile game called Project Cars Go in H2 in partnership with a publisher from Korea called Gameville. It's a free-to-play game, and unlike Formula One, you do not have to drive the car, so it's a much more mass market and simple game, a little bit like the same mechanic as CSR for those of you who know the game, where you just with one finger could click at the right time on the car, and if you manage to get it on time, which is really a lot more simple than driving the car, you can win. And obviously being more simple, it means that it's more mass market, and that we hope this game will be able to take our share into the mobile business to a new level. We've got our co-development deal on NetEase that we've signed a year and a half ago. The game will come out for soft launch, so not everywhere in the world, but in some parts of the world in calendar 21. We're hoping to see the game go global sometimes in our fiscal, but we're not going to anticipate any revenue until fiscal 22. It's a very exciting game. The guys are building something that is very impressive, and we believe there will be some potential strong upside for the future, but currently none of that upside has been baked into any of the numbers, so pure upside. And we've also released Grid Autosport through Feral. It was a licensing deal, so they took our game, ported it onto mobile and also on Nintendo Switch. So altogether, we're still not huge yet on mobile, but growing, and we're taking some action going forward to grow in that department, which we'll talk to you in a few minutes. Esports has been unbelievable. COVID-19 has made esports huge. It's gone from a geeky type of hardcore gamers watching Twitch to suddenly a huge audience watching the tournament on ESPN and Sky or Fox. So it's really gone to a completely different level. We've done it for both Dirt Rally 2 and Formula One. Both had real drivers. The power of F1 and their relationship with various TV channel has dominated the news. Having the real drivers and a lot of them participating has created a frenzy around eSport that we didn't expect. Now, that has contributed to a significant increase in our revenue during that time period against both F1 and Dirt Rally 2. And as Rashid was showing earlier, that we doubled our audience during the lockdown on our games overall. I could tell you that F1 was 3 times bigger and Dirt Rally was 2.5 times bigger. So really strong impact, and we're hoping to capitalize on the momentum to continue going forward, even when the lockdown is no longer. Games as a service is a crucial part of our strategy to increase our revenue per user. So for those who are not 100% familiar with games as a service, some games company call it recurring revenue. It's basically the additional content that we sell to customer after they've bought the initial game. So you bought the game for, say, £50 or whatever price you managed to buy the game for, and then we sell you an extra car, we sell you a new circuit, we sell you a new helmet, and that's what we call the service part of the business. This is something that is very demanding, as you could see from this slide. We've managed to have 4 seasons and released new content every 2 weeks, extremely intensive in terms of delivering new content and also extremely profitable and great results. So if we move to the slide 15, you will see that for Dirt Rally 2, on which we put the most emphasis, 18% of the total revenue behind the Dirt Rally 2 franchise is games as a service. So it's a significant improvement. It's a number that we obviously would like to grow. And when you look at F1 or Grid, so far the numbers are around 5%. So there's a lot of room for growth. And going forward, this is something that we're going to apply to all our games. We would expect FY21 to be probably around 10% revenue for games as a service. And what's interesting as well, if you look on the charts on the right, is that not only we sell DLC over time, but it's growing over time. So it's not just after the launch where you make all the money now. It's changing the pattern, the life cycle of our games and making it flatter over time, which is a criticism that we've had in the past about being lumpy. Games as a service is the way to delump, if you will, our business. Just after the end of the year, we signed another milestone agreement with World Rally Championship. We're very excited about that. It's a partnership that is similar in terms of mechanics with the one we have with Formula One, in the sense that we're going to pay them a minimum guarantee and a royalty, which we will recoup our minimum guarantee first. We have the exclusive rights, including all platforms and esports, from 2023 for 5 years minimum. And not sure how much you know about WRC. It's a very big audience as well. In terms of the size of the game, to just give you an idea of scale, we would expect WRC to be about half of the size of Formula One. So still a big business. And interestingly for us, another franchise that's going to be a yearly iteration. So every year we'll be able to have this type of revenue. And we are planning to emulate what we've done on Formula One and make sure that we grow that franchise year on year, which could mean that over the 5 years, it could become a very significant part of our revenue. I will now pass it on to Rashid for the financial highlight before letting you know about the outlook.
So in terms of the financial highlights, you may have seen our detailed RNS, which was released at the start of the week. However, I'll run you through some of the top line numbers. In terms of our revenue, adjusted EBITDA, our adjusted earnings, etc. And I mean, the first point to make here is a like for like. For FY20, we incorporated SMS into the business, and SMS was loss-making for the final quarter of the year. And the reason for that is the launches are due in fiscal 21. So our revenue, first of all, has grown by 7%. As Frank mentioned earlier, we had 2 game launches versus 3 last year. And again, that's a testament to the strength of our products, and in particular, the growth that we've seen on Formula One. Our digital share also increased, which is good news for us as a business, because as our digital share increases, our margins also increase, and there's a saving on our distributor costs as well. So overall, there's circa 30% improvement on our adjusted EBITDA. Now, margins have, as you see on this slide, they've moved from 87.6% last year to 85.7%. However, you should note that on a like-for-like basis, they have actually increased. And the reason behind that is last year, in FY19, we concluded a deal with a Chinese company called NetEase. That deal was for $8 million. And if that was to be stripped out from FY19, that margin of 80% versus this year's actual of 85.7%. Now, we spoke about COVID. I gave a brief update on COVID earlier. There's also been a very slight impact in terms of our margin on COVID. That's due to additional support we provided retail right at the end of the fiscal year to ensure we don't get returns on any of our box products which were out in retail due to lockdown, etc. Final couple of points. We're cash flow positive, as you see on the chart, nearly 25 million in terms of cash, and then adjusted EBITDA 18.2 versus 18.7. But again, on a like-for-like basis, if we were to take out the loss for SMS during the fiscal year, that figure would be 19 million. Just moving on to the income statement, just a couple of points to note on here. First of all, in terms of our research expenses, amortization. So research expenses is our development cost, and what we typically do as a business is we capitalize over the production phase, which varies between 12 months and 2 years. So typically Formula One is over a 12-month period because it's an annual release. Our other games are over a 2-year period. And then we will amortize on release. Our amortization period is over a 12-month period. However, during month 1 of release, we will amortize 65%, and the balance is on a flat line over the remainder of the year. Now, a quick couple of points to mention on here. This year we did have a exceptional cost, a non-recurring. This was the acquisition of SMS. Last year we had the IPO, which was 1.5 million, which was treated below the line. However, the 1.4 million is included within operating profit, and the reason for that, it's adjusted within the adjusted EBITDA, and the reason for that is it's an acquisition, and we may end up doing a number of acquisitions, but we will only ever do one IPO, so that's the difference between the two. And then one final comment in terms of share-based payments. Last year it was at 6.7 million with the IPO, but we expect it to normalise going forward at a charge of 1 million going forward. And you may have also noted that our capitalisation costs have increased as well, and the reason for that is the acquisition of SMS and the capitalisation of development cost. Our balance sheet goes from strength to strength, and just one point I want to quickly make on the balance sheet, which is on the intangibles. There was a significant increase in terms of that intangible, and that's due to the SMS acquisition. So in total 35 million, which the numbers are based on fair value, looking at forecasts going forward. And that review was concluded by BDO and then audited by GT. And then, as Frank has already mentioned, we signed a 5-year extension with Formula One. And from an accounting perspective, that needs to be capitalised, and thus it's falling within intangibles, and the offset of that is within trade payables. And finally, in terms of cash flow, as I've mentioned, we are cash flow positive. We are 25.5 million cash at the end of the period. Hopefully, our aim is to utilise that cash. And as it grows over the next 2 to 3 years, analysts are forecasting that it will double in the next 2 to 3 years, and we aim to use that for further acquisition. On that point, I'll hand over to Frank. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. So, Outlook, why are we so excited? So, it starts with a structural market growth. The game industry has been booming for a number of years now, and it is not ready to stop. In fact, I think it will accelerate. So analysts are predicting around 8% growth per annum. The shift to digital continues. So it's good news. It means we are going to deliver more profit at the same level of sales versus box. The next-gen console are finally arriving. Microsoft Xbox X and Sony PlayStation 5 launching this November. It will have a significant impact on boosting the console market. And then with the expansion of 5G globally, we will see streaming starting to become more of a reality. It has already started with Stadia, xCloud, PS Now, but I think it's when 5G becomes more accessible to everyone that we will see the real takeoff. So it still is a couple of years away, but certainly making some strong foray, and new players are coming soon, which will be announced. I think you've heard about Facebook and potentially Amazon. So we're really in an industry now that used to be with reasonably big players like Sony and Sega and Nintendo many years ago. Now we're talking about the biggest market caps in the world: Google, Amazon, Apple. Every single monster is in the games industry because they see the potential, and that's a overall very strong message for us. Now, as Codemasters, we have this year our single biggest year in terms of releasing racing games. We've got Formula 1 20 in a week and a half, 10th of July. We've got Fast and Furious for the 7th of August. We've announced yesterday Project Cars 3 for the 28th of August, just announced yesterday. And Dirt 5 will be from the 9th of October for current generation platform and PC, and then will be launched day and date with the next gen platform when they come out. And on mobile, we have Project Cars Go, which will soft launch probably around September. Not sure at what point it's going to go global within the year. So for that reason, even though we believe in that title very strongly, we didn't really put a big number behind it because it's more about the date uncertainty at this point of when we'll go global. Specifically on F1 20, the game's going to launch on current gen, including Google Stadia. We are fortunate that the season is actually starting just at the same time as we're launching the game. So, where we were a little bit worried a few months ago, thinking that there may not be any Grand Prix at all, it turned out that we benefited from esports tremendously during the absence of Grand Prix, and now we're benefiting from the season starting exactly when our game is launching. The game this year has got major improvements. We believe, in fact, that the improvement from 19 to 20 are as big as the improvement we saw from 18 to 19. Now, I'm not saying we're going to increase our revenue as much as, but certainly it has that potential. My team is a feature that everybody's waiting for. You can create your own team, the 11th team on the grid, and this is a feature that consumers have been raving about. The game is more accessible for a wider audience, including split screen, which means you can play with your mates, your dad, your son, your girlfriend on a sofa in a way that you couldn't before. And we're starting, we will announce virtual currency, I believe, this week, where we'll be able to play on games as a service. There will be what we call a podium pass with a certain amount of privileges, skins, liveries, emoticons, but none of what you're going to be buying if you buy that season pass for podium pass, which is a couple of months pass, is going to be pay to win. It's all decorative items, so no risk to upset consumers on that. We also have Schumacher Special Edition, hence maybe the crazy pre-orders we have in Germany. And the game this year, honestly, it's not just us who think it's a very good game, but the likes of George Russell. We've been working very closely with the drivers and got feedback. Some sort of key data I could give you are current pre-orders are trending higher than that of last year. And more interestingly, they're not just trending higher in digital, they're also higher on box. So despite a declining box market and a lockdown, the reopening and the growth of the market overall and the quality of our game, obviously, we're hoping to grow on every platform, more on digital, but still on box as well. Fast and Furious, the game's coming out on 7th of August. For those who don't know, it is not based on the movie. It is based on the franchise. It's with the actors, Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, but it is not literally the same story as number 9. This is why when the movie had been postponed because of coronavirus, we decided to still launch the game this year. It was scheduled to be May. We took a few more months to improve it, so it's launching now on the 7th of August. Important for you to understand, this is a game where there is a partnership with Bandai as publisher, Slightly Mad as a developer, and Universal as the IP owner. And the partnership is a third on cost and on profit. So unfortunately, if the game was to perform better than we expect, we would only get a third of that. On the other hand, if it was to be performing less than we expect, we only decrease our revenue by a third of that. So it is not a significant upside or downside for us compared to what we've planned because of the nature of the deal. But still, it's a very strong franchise. It has millions and millions of fans. And well, the game is not a game for racing people. It's not a game that will appeal to F1 or Project Cars driver, but it will appeal to Fast and Furious fan. We can see in the current previews that the excitement is strictly coming from the fans of the franchise. So Universal tells us how big the franchise is. We can see it, and hopefully they will carry the game and make it the success it should be. It is also interesting for us because the movie coming out in April means we're going to have a second life. At that point, we may decide to build some downloadable content that is from the movie. So we could then repackage the game and resell it. And it means that with the amount of awareness that there will be around the movie at that time, there will be a strong second wind, which is likely to be part of fiscal 22. Project Cars 3, probably the number one reason we acquired Slightly Mad Studio, a very successful franchise. They own the IP. Due to the fact that Slightly Mad didn't have much cash, they did a partnership deal with Bandai Namco. So again, on this one, it's not a third, but it's half. We get 50% of the revenue and 50% of the cost and the profit. Going forward, there's a possibility that we could, if we wanted to, publish this game directly and take 100% of the profit. And that was one of the advantages of ourselves being a publisher. When we looked at Project Cars and SMS in general, we knew that if we were able to publish the game, we would be able to deliver additional profits. The franchise is a very strong brand. It's been around for 5 years now. There's been 2 iterations, very successful. It's a big game. And this game is no exception. It's a very big game, a huge number of tracks and location, a much bigger game than what we've built ourselves so far. So we're excited about it, and we've just announced yesterday that it was planned for 28th of August. There will be some service as well with a number of downloadable tracks and contents over time. And as I said earlier, if the movie comes out in April or May, there may be something related to the movie at that time. Dirt 5 is our first foray into next gen. Really excited about this one. We announced the game a few weeks ago through our partnership with Microsoft. We were one of the games they've announced for the lineup of their new platform, Xbox X. It is a game that is extremely different from Dirt Rally. As you remember, we split the 2 franchises because we wanted Dirt Rally to be hardcore rally, and we didn't want Dirt to be rally at all. But it's much more bright, extreme. It's a bold game. It's really, really turned out to be a fantastic product. For those of you who are curious enough, we released 2-3 days ago influencers preview of the game for the first time. And it's earlier than we usually do it because it's 5 months before launch. And the previews are absolutely fantastic. So very excited about this one. It's coming on both current and next gen. This is the type of game that could be a breakaway success. We have some reasonably aggressive number in our plan, but we are very enthusiastic from the response from consumers so far. Pre-orders have started and they're tracking well. So this could be a really nice surprise for us. And it's planned to be a very long service at the back of it. It says 12 months here, but I believe given the way the game has been built, and we will reveal something very special in August, this game will have a massive amount of service. Project Cars Go, our mobile game, I mentioned that earlier. It's from Slightly Mad Studio. It's probably the most beautiful mobile game I've seen on racing. It's absolutely gorgeous. It looks incredible. It's taken directly from the console engine, ported to mobile, and it's exceptional. It's published by Gameville, as I said, a very experienced Korean developer. They've got high expectation, and so have we. But until we know exactly when it's going to be hard launched, we would rather be very conservative and put some only very small numbers for this year. But this is one that could be a big surprise for us. It could potentially be one of the most successful SMS games. So I guess in summary, we've had a good year last year, but we've also put in place what we need to be successful for the future. So between the partnership with F1 long-term and WRC, the growth of esports, the sell down of Reliance, the increased focus on games as a service, and of course the Slightly Mad acquisition, which gives us a massive relay of growth. As you know, if looking at the analyst forecast, the jump from fiscal 20 to fiscal 21 is significant, both in terms of top line and bottom line. So market's growing, largest number of game ever. We are in a great position I honestly believe, we honestly convinced that, well, we've done very well in the last 4 years. We've reached a new level now, and we will not stop here. We'll continue to grow both organically, and we'll be active on M&A, as Rashid mentioned earlier, and particularly in the mobile segment. I think we're at a point now where it's your turn to ask questions, and we will answer.
And we already have one question. Do you foresee any games focusing on the World Endurance Championship, including Le Mans 24 Hour?
I do foresee it because I know who's making it. It's not us, and somebody is making a World Endurance game. It hasn't been announced, so I don't really want to comment. But yes, I foresee one. However, it doesn't mean that we couldn't take Le Mans in itself and include Le Mans in one of our games. So while Le Mans is part of WEC, what we call World Endurance Championship, we believe that Le Mans is what's the most interesting part of WEC. And if we were to work together with WEC, we would only want the Le Mans circuit, which we had in Project Cars a couple of years ago. So it's not impossible that at some stage it may come back. As you may know, we've got a number of championship or cars that we include them in our games rather than making a dedicated game. So like we've got F1 or WRC, a dedicated game. This year, for instance, on Project Cars, there's some Indy cars in the game. And Le Mans is absolutely one of the brand that we would probably love to have and see again in our games in the future.
And the next question, is the delay to Fast and Furious having much current effect on revenue?
No, it doesn't, for two reasons. Because we are a third of the overall number, the impact was not material.
And F1 is back very soon. Has its absence significantly affected revenue for you?
It has, yes. It's much higher than it has been in the past because of esports and the lockdown period where consumers had time to play their favorite game, and some consumers who hadn't played Formula One for a few years came back to it. So we gained both existing consumers playing more, but new consumers coming in by the game. So I would say the impact was quite significant to the up rather than down.
And where internationally are your markets? Do we have a breakdown?
No, we don't have a breakdown, but I could tell you that Europe remains number one. The Americas are number two, and Asia number three. We're particularly strong in territories like Germany, UK, and actually North America have a territory separately is probably the biggest. But because it's so much bigger, it should be even bigger. So proportionately, we are more successful in Europe. This is where this year may be a little bit different because Fast and Furious will be bigger in America than it will be in Europe. And Dirt 5, because of the type of game it is, will probably be as big, if not bigger, in North America as well than it is in Europe.
Great to learn more about Codemasters, thank you. With regard to the Fast and Furious franchise, how long is this currently for, and how likely is the franchise to be renewed?
So it's up in the air, really, because the game's been pushed back, the movie's been pushed back, and it will depend on a number of factors. The first one is how successful is the first one? If it's a huge success, I don't think there's going to be any question if there's going to be a second one. If the success is only moderate, we're going to have to wonder whether, A, do we want to make another one, but do we prefer to have maybe 100% of our and work on our own IP, or have a third of someone else's IP? So I would say, unless it's a big success, as Codemasters, we prefer working on long-term IP that we own, and we are looking at alternatives now so that in the next few months, we're in a position to take the decision.
And how much of your expenses require third-party rather than in-house expenditure on development, localization, porting, etc.?
So I would say it's roughly 10 to 15%, but it varies on which games we're developing. But yes, roughly 10 to 15%.
And will esports continue in its current form, i.e. on TV, once F1 starts again?
That's a funny question because it has been on TV for a year and a half, but it has been more visible because of the drivers taking part of it. So the answer is yes, it will continue to be on TV. The question is more, are we going to be able to still have drivers involved when they're going to be back working and trying to win the championship? And that is something we're currently dealing with and hoping to solve. But certainly there's both from F1 and ourselves a great desire, as you can understand, to continue.
And could you explain briefly page 33 of the presentation?
Yes, so page 33 of the presentation, this was the consideration in terms of the acquisition of SMS. So over to the left-hand side was the upfront payment, which was made to SMS. So it was the $25 million in cash, $5 million in shares, and then $5 million will be paid on the release of Fast and Furious, as we've mentioned, which is now imminent. And then the balance of 161 million is the earn-out consideration. When the deal was finalized with the SMS team, we wanted to give the team an incentive and not to give them a very low target. We wanted to give them a big and wide target to ensure that if their products were successful, they would benefit from that deal. Now, how this works is there is the 161 million. It's based on 107.8% of the adjusted EBITDA in any fiscal year. Now, from a cash consideration perspective, as you see here, 75% of it is in cash and 25% is in shares. However, using year one as an example, 30% of that is deferred, and it's deferred into year three. And that's just to ensure that if they have an amazing year in year one and then a not so great year in year two, there's almost a clawback mechanism, and it's averaging over a 3-year period. So that's how this schedule works, and you'll see the maximum consideration that they could earn is 196 million over that 3-year period. However, it's worth noting that within our numbers and within the acquisition accounting that's been discussed on page 20, you will note I made a value of 35 million in terms of the fair value. That's based on forecast, so there is quite a bit of difference because we have taken a conservative view in terms of what the consideration potentially could be over the 3 years.
Great, thank you. Is it likely that the revenue from F1 will drop once the televised live racing recommences?
No, we don't think so. What may drop is the number of people playing or watching esports, but we believe that our revenue will continue to grow in terms of selling games.
Surprised that you say world growth in games generally is only 8% per annum. I'd have expected more. Do you have any comments on that?
Depending on what you read, it says 8 to 10. I kind of agree. I think it will be more, but I'm only using data from the Newzoo of this world. These are not our own data. These are data from the market. So it's very possible that, as I said, I've seen 10%, I've seen 8%. But when we report this in our documents, we'd rather be on the conservative side rather than overselling it.
What happens after lockdown eases? How will it affect sales?
It's a great question. What we think, and obviously we haven't got a crystal ball, but what we're seeing now, where lockdown is pretty much, apart from a few countries reopen, there's still a bigger audience and a bigger market than pre-COVID-19. And what we believe happened, again, it's not yet, it will have to wait a few months to know more, but our feeling is that it has reignited the market overall and the interest in gaming. So we think it will remain higher than it was before COVID, but not as big as during COVID or during lockdown, if you see what I mean. And what we're seeing is, I mentioned earlier, but we even think that it has grown both for box and for digital, not just for digital. Digital's growing faster, but we could see after the lockdown, for instance, The Last of Us #2 from Sony has launched on Friday and was the biggest retail launch ever from Sony PlayStation 4. So there is a market. People are eager to go out and buy games. And when they don't buy them directly from retail in a shop, they buy them online from Amazon or games online. They have e-commerce sites. So we think it have a positive and long-lasting impact. Of course, now, if the economy goes pear-shaped, there's another wave. And at that point, I don't know. It's really hard to predict. But I would say that if we are hit, we're likely less hit than some other sectors because it is such a mode of entertainment that's become popular and that allows you to be very social even though you are home.
What considerations have you made regarding the SMS team beyond year 4, IP, incentives, competition?
So stock options, we are making sure that they are incentivized. The reality is the biggest incentive is going to be, do they enjoy what they do? Do they think they can thrive and grow their business? And do we leave them enough room so that they don't feel they're being asphyxiated? And this is exactly what we're doing. We've integrated the core team now into our management, and it's going really well. And we are actually surprised on how well it is, because we were concerned they're truly independent. What are they going to do with a company that is more corporate, more organized? And in fact, it's the opposite that we saw. We saw a bunch of people who couldn't care less about finance, about legal, about process, about HR, and suddenly they're using all our processes. They are relieved, and they can now focus on what they do best, which is making great games. So, like everything else, and the churn since we've acquired them is no different from Codemasters' churn. We haven't lost any single major person from the studio so far.
Many thanks to you both. This is actually the end of the questions. Do you have any closing remarks, Frank?
No, thank you very much for attending. We're very excited for the future, and I hope you are too. Thank you, Tamzin, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.